Once the portal to the Ka opens up for an evolving star being, star race, they begin to build their own oversouls in the Ka. The more the star being learns in the 4%, the more composed knowledge will build in the Ka, and thus, both the 4% and the 96% expand by individual experiences. Therefore, the universe is not infinite, neither the Ka nor the 4%, but is ever expanding due to that each individual brings new experiences to the multiverse every moment of their existence. So, let's take random star beings, belonging to a random soul group, as an example here. With time, these star beings build their own fire in the 96% by expanding their oversoul. They can then use the fire from their oversoul and split it up into more fires and use some of the soul energy of their avatar to explore the universe and its dimensions and densities. They can use many fire fragments from their oversoul and thus create new entities by using 4% soul energy in form of an avatar, and eventually, if they so wish, take a baby body on a totally different planet and become an entirely new being with a new personality, but will still be somewhat connected to the original individual from which they borrowed the soul energy avatar energy to build their own avatar. In other words, they learn how to nano-travel. They leave their physical 3D body on their planet of origin and expand out in space, time by letting a fire fragment from their oversoul ride the avatar. They now can travel the nano world as tiny particles and explore the dimensions. It's quite interesting, because science is now talking about string theory, where they say that the dimensions are super tiny. That part they have totally correct, hence, all this new great interest in developing nanotechnology. Now, what is the difference between the star being described above and a human soul body mind complex? The main difference is where our fire comes from. How come we're called royalty and even divine by certain other star beings out there? As I explained in the case with the random star beings, they earned their connection with the Ka and built their oversoul as they went along. We all do. But they had no real personal connection with the Ka except on rare occasions, perhaps until it was established later on in their development. Their progress and experiences in detail, moment by moment, were recorded both in the Ka and in the 4%. But not until much later could they establish a conscious portal between the Ka and the 4%. The fire they access could be any fire of the Ka universe. Not so in humans. Some humans have the royal fire in them, a heritage from the Namlu, and many of us also carry their DNA. Moreover, both the Namlu and Homo sapiens had and still have the fire of the goddess herself in them, plus that of several divine angelic beings of the Ka. Lord Enki and Ninki not only had the permission, but were sent out on a mission to create an experiment where the new 3D beings, who eventually became Homo sapiens, would include the fire of all these highest order beings, and the goddess herself. She wanted to see how fast we could develop compassion, and how much we could contribute to the overall multiverse with the, hopefully, great and insightful experiences we would have in the world of matter. We were of course meant to report back to our oversouls in the Ka, and to the goddess and the angels themselves as we progressed. Instead of doing what the goddess wanted, Prince Ea became Lord Enki with the Sirian alliance, after he'd connected up with his stepfather, the King of Kings of Sirius, and the Earth missionaries of the King Lord Enlil and his team of star races. Lord Enki's team of geneticists, after had experimented back and forth, agreed upon a certain body type they would use for this new experiment, which eventually branched off into two projects, Project Elohim, which was a development of the existing, highly evolved Homo neanderthalensis of the Namlu genetic line, and Project Kingu, also called Project Erectus, using Homo erectus Cro-Magnon as prototypes. These bodies were programmed similar to a computer operating system with software programs and everything, and they had their own mind for easier control. Into these bodies, the Enki team gathered soul energy from the 4% universe and put that into the bodies as a basic life force. This became the avatar. So, already here, Enki turned against his mother's wish, by programming the bodies to become slaves, rather than evolving biological entities with the avatar and the fire working in unison. Then, Enki's science team collected the fires designated for the experiment, and instead of putting one fire in each body, they glued a lot of fires together to create one being, one consciousness of sorts, and attached this big composite of fires to an avatar in one single body. Enki also added his own, Nens, and other star beings' DNA to our human bodies. Then his team did the same thing with the next body, and so on. One plausible reason why Enki decided to do this was because he had access to more divine fires than there were bodies, and being in conspiracy with the Sirians, he wanted to use them all as soon as possible. So the Sirians could start abusing and misusing this new species and suck the fires from the person, in order to gain power and access to the heart of the Ka. So that was the second crime committed by Enki's team. Furthermore, in cooperation with Enlil and the rest of the Sirian overlords, they created the grid around Earth, which disconnected all the fires from the Ka and the goddess herself. Humankind lost the connection with their oversouls and the mother goddess. No one reported back to the Ka, and the experiences humankind had here on Earth stayed on Earth but were recorded in the Akashic records. We humans were unable to contribute to the overall experience of the universe, because we had been disconnected. This is where the idea of the 12-strand DNA comes from, and the myth that our DNA was cut off. None of that is true in its real sense, but works as an analogy. The so-called junk DNA, which is not junk at all, is the DNA we have not been using because we were disconnected from both the 4% universe and the Ka. Our chakras more or less closed down, except the two lower ones. The dormant DNA has to do with our connection with the outside universe, which exists outside the grid and ultimately in the Ka. Now, fortunately, there are holes in the grid so we can take advantage of the upgrade from the gamma rays of the Sun, Alcyone, and the galactic center. This is reconnecting us with the universe again, and our junk DNA is getting reactivated as we speak in all humans. The holes in the grid are to some degree natural, in the sense that the grid has deteriorated lately, and the Sirians haven't been able to keep up with it. It mainly deteriorates because we humans are the ones who keep much of the grid in place with our thoughts and our energies, and especially our belief systems, and now when we are evolving back to where we once were as Namlu, the grid can't sustain itself. Also, we have had help from positive ETs, who have assisted us in destroying the grid, according to the Pleiadians.